So today I want to talk about artificial intelligence. And the title, as you might have seen, is Art Official Intelligence. And we're going to talk about it a bit because it's interesting. I know that a lot of people are afraid of artificial intelligence. A lot of people are afraid of how it's going to replace us in different jobs. People are already building relationships with artificial intelligence. They're having more intimate relationships with bots than they do with other human beings. And there's a whole host of other things that are being invited into our world because of artificial intelligence. But the reason why I call it art official intelligence is because I just had an exchange with a friend who's an artist, and they expressed that they don't typically engage with any kind of art that employs AI. And I wanted to, or I should say, I was inspired to address that, and not only to address that in particular, but what brings up our resistance to different technologies and why I think some of these technologies, while they could be used to facilitate greater expressions of humanity and more abundance for everybody, why we tend to use it like assholes. So here we go. Step one, I'm going to start off, or part one, I should say, is I happened to be on a podcast earlier today called The Human Layer. The episode's not out yet, but it'll be coming out soon. And we talked about technology. And one of the things that I brought up in the conversation was the work of John Naisbitt, who wrote this book called Megatrends a while back. And it just talked a lot about the different trends that emerge in our society. And one of the things he talked about was high tech and high touch. And the idea was that as high tech increases in our society, there has to be a corresponding high touch element, or we run the risk of losing our humanity. And we find that all the time. I know that when social media first came out, I was like, because of the way I function, I was like, this is going to be awesome. People are going to be able to communicate with humans from all over the world, and the world is going to become a better place. And we're going to be loving each other because we're going to learn about each other, and it's going to be exciting. And then as artificial intelligence and different softwares enabled us to be able to communicate across different languages, I, as a linguist and a person who has spoken 4 different languages within my lifetime, thought, wow, this is going to be awesome, because now that we have the ability, hi T. Ree and Judy, now that we have the ability to translate different languages so easily, this also will help us be able to facilitate connecting across differences and all these things. But what we found in our societies is there's this increasing emergence of authoritarianism, and the technologies that could enable us to create a more flourishing society are actually doing the opposite. And there's a lot of things that I could use in African American vernacular English from the hood where I grew up to express how I feel about this, but I'm going to try to make it accessible language. So here's the basics. Humans, we are not as evolved as the technology we use, generally speaking. Hey there. And this is why. At our fundamental level, there are 2 ways that we tend to express ourselves. One would be an embodied yes, and the other would be an embodied no. The embodied yes manifests itself as sex. So sex is a way of us building these bonds, and it goes deep to our bodies and our survival mechanisms and things like that. And then violence is our no. So our basic fundamental ways of expressing ourselves that are still programmed in our lizard brain is sex means yes, violence means no. And when we merge the two, which happens way too frequently in our society, we see all sorts of things. Then third is our ability to express ourselves in words. But many people, and if you've been following my series, War of the Words, I try to articulate this. Many of us take words for granted. We assume that everyone uses language the way we use language, which is not true. Every word that we use is a social construct, or a contract and an agreement, that if I say apple, then the symbol of apple is going to enter into your consciousness. And then if I'm asking you for an apple, you're going to give me an apple. But apple could also be a computer. So there's some complexity there, right? one word could be meaning more than one thing. And so there is not 100% agreement in the words that we use. And so we have to ask clarifying questions and all these other things like that. And words themselves are not necessarily designed to articulate truth. Words, essentially, the fundamental use of words was more for deception. I used to be a language analyst and I studied linguistics, and it is generally believed that the first words were used to kind of even the survival playing field. So there were people who were physically weaker who could not defeat someone who was like a massive giant that could just pluck their head off, like a Shaquille O'Neal versus Danny DeVito or something like that. So the Danny DeVitos of the world, no offense to you, Danny DeVito, you make me look tall. But at any rate, Danny DeVito type folks, they were able to say, "Ooh, a tiger," and then the Shaquille O'Neals of the world in those times would go, "What? Tiger?" And then next thing you know, Danny DeVito could knock Shaquille O'Neal upside the head with a rock. So basically, people were able to use words or symbols in the form of words to use as a survival mechanism. And then over time, words developed, language developed, all these other things. And then as we became more, I would say, more comforts entered into our lives, and we could start to use words in different ways because the way we've used language has evolved. I don't want to get into a whole boring story about it, but I'll just say like this. If you look at the ancient religions and the ways they express themselves, they use language completely differently than the way we use language. They understood symbolism. They knew what they were conjuring up in the consciousness of people when they told certain stories. Whereas us folks who use languages more literally over time started to develop this notion that other folks use the language the same way that we do. It's not true. That's a tangent. What I'm trying to kind of lean us into is this awareness that as we had these innovations, because language was an innovation, and then being able to write words was an innovation, then printing press was an innovation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these constructs, these constructed innovations that enable us to use language and imagery and all these other things to move people has evolved. But a lot of our basic selves has not evolved. And so we use these same technologies that could be bridging these gaps to use for basically sex and violence, basically yeses and nos, ones and zeros, even though the world is getting increasingly more complex. And we could use these things in easier ways that we could contribute to flourishing and things like that. We tend not to because we haven't evolved internally. So how do we I don't want to use the word combat. How do we transform ourselves? That's where art comes in. See, art, as I've said in previous posts, art turns chaos into culture. Again, art turns chaos into culture. And so when we have all these things that are encountering one another and creating these massive amounts of chaos, when a person's able to take all that chaos into themselves and then reimagine that chaos in some kind of way, in an artistic fashion, whether it's a dance or a poem or a painting, they take all of that chaos, that wet clay that has no shape or form, and they turn it into something. And then that form that they turn it into actually creates something that folks can cohere around. And then you can build community and all these other things. And so when you look at communities that form and take shape, it's largely because of artists who are able to take those ideas and that chaos and put it into words, imagery, song, all these things that then establish a kind of a culture. And that's how we build our cultures. And that's how we build this social cohesion through the work of artists. Or if somebody wants to destroy things, they get rid of the artist. So how does AI play into this? Well, I'll tell you a quick story that's going to be expressed more in some other pieces that I'm writing. But last Friday, I was decided I wanted to spend father-daughter time with my kids, right? So I took one of them out and we had a good time together. And we actually did an episode up here on Substack together. And that was our daddy daughter time. And then the other one, I took her out and she wanted to go look at some beauty products or whatever. And so I went. And as we were leaving, we had already had people staring at us as we were walking down the street in Reading, Massachusetts, where we were. And I noticed it and things, but I, kind of tried to ignore it. And then as we were leaving, somebody in a big old pickup truck did the universal symbol of basically ignorant aggression by revving their engine. So that made me kind of pique my ear, like, okay, what's about to happen? So as they saw us, they put on the gas, which if you're one of those people, which I doubt if you're watching my videos, you're stupid. So at any rate, what does that do? What do you think that does? That's a caveat. They did that, boom, and then some person basically almost climbed out their window and screamed, niggas. And I normally don't say that word, especially if it's mixed audiences listening to whatever it is I'm saying. But that's what they did. They got out, they stuck out the window and just screamed, niggas. And it put us in a state. It didn't really do anything to me, but it made my daughter feel some kind of way. And I started talking to her about it. And we went through a process that I call from rage to responsibility, which I will put in a later article on the Substack. But this idea of rage from rage to responsibility is that when we encounter things that make us rageful, which there are things that do that, that rage energy is an energy that can also be a chaotic energy that through artistry, we can transform into something that beautifies or expands or raises consciousness. And I'm all about that, right? So we navigated the rage, got to a place where my daughter decided to let it go. And then out of responsibility, I decided to convert that energy. And one of the ways that I convert energy is through poetry or through writing or through creating songs, which I usually rap or something like that. And for years, I've written all these songs, but I could not necessarily pay the money to go in the studio all the time. And because my life wasn't shaped around that. So a lot of times the songs just kind of hang out and I write them or make them up or sing them to myself and they just exist, or I make them on a recording on my phone. But because of AI, I now can take these same songs that used to take me, so I can write the songs really quickly, but I can't produce them as quickly because I had to depend on other people. And so I took a class and learned how to use AI to do that. And so I'm able to now take these songs that I already know what they sound like in my head and bring them out into the world. And I've done it with several songs recently. And originally I was just doing it for myself, but then I decided to share it with the world. I won't get into that whole like part of responsibility with that, but I did. And, but then I had some people who are like, well, I don't know how I feel about AI art. And the reason why that is because people are operating from the same fear mindset, generally speaking, that they are going to be replaced by something, what they call artificial, right? You can't be replaced by anything artificial. Let me first and foremost tell you that, because whatever you bring into the world, whatever tool you bring out, because the greatest painter in the world can have a beautiful idea of what they want to paint, but they need a technology to express that. So they need the paintbrush. They need somebody. They didn't have to invent paints. Like somebody a long time ago invented paints before a modern day artist could use those paints. And they had to go through a developmental technological process to develop that stuff, to develop brushes, develop canvases, develop the materials, to develop the paint. It's a technology itself, but then mixed with the human element, it creates art. And so there's no difference between that and using AI for art. Now, is one thing I would think that and I'm not saying a person can't do this, where a person just doesn't put any effort into it at all, and just passes it off as their own. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it still would not exist if that person didn't exist. But there's other ways of using it, which is the way that I try to use it to enhance what can be done and to deliver it to people in a way that gets around some of our programming and some of our fears. And that's how I kind of use this AI art. And so I made a song based off of the people calling us N-word to let people know, hey, I know you thought you were going to diminish me and my child by calling us niggas or niggers or whatever, but I can twist that energy around. I can transmute it and I can create something. And then I put it out there slowly but surely. I'm putting it out there on social media stuff, not just for me, but for other people who feel like they can be diminished by some external person, and people who don't realize that any energy that comes to you is yours to be used. Now, we don't usually think of it that way. A lot of times when people put us down or treat us like crap or something, we're just like, oh no. But what is really happening is this person is dumping their energy. If you take energy and you think of it as like money or any other kind of resource, when a person takes energy to try to put you down, they dump that energy on you. If you're a conscious being who knows how to use art in an alchemical way, you can literally, like, I do comedy, right? I do comedy. I do all these different expressions because I know there's a lot of tools in the toolkit with which I can take energy, transmute it, and alchemically turn it into something else. So, like, I talked to a white supremacist and a Satanist a long time ago, and he said some stupid stuff. I did stand up a week and some ago, and I told stories about talking to that white supremacist and Satanist, and it was comical because that person gave me their dumb energy, and then I was able to transmute it and turn it into jokes. This person called us niggers, and then I was able to transmute it and turn it into the song. And I called the song "Now I'm Gonna Get Angry," which is acronym, and you can put the letters together and figure out what the acronym is. And then I made a song about it, and I created art out of that person's chaos. And for I think somebody else joined, but it doesn't show who it was. For the person who just joined a little bit ago, I was saying that artists turn chaos into culture, and that technology, when mixed with the human layer, creates something that never would have existed before. And that when we do that, we basically are able to transform almost any energy. But we have to be mindful of our capacity to do such a thing. Many of us just take whatever's been dumped on us, and then we get diminished because somebody's like, I'll tell you a funny, this is not that funny story, but I'll tell you, when I came home from school when I was little, or I'm still little, but when I was young, I came home from school and I had just moved to this neighborhood. I didn't know anybody. I go to school and the kids were joking me saying I was short, right? So, and my dad was like 6'2" and like 270, and I was like a little dude. And so I was only in like second grade at this point, but I think they knew I wasn't shooting up. So I come home and I'm like, my mom's like, "Well, I was school today." And I was like, when I started getting ready to cry, you know? And I was like, they were joking me. And then she said, "Well, what did they say?" And I said, "They called me short." And then my mom said, "Boy, you are short. If you don't get out of my face." And then she said, "Don't you ever come up in here crying about somebody telling you something that's true. And if they say something that isn't true, then you can also ignore them or tell them about themselves." Da da da. So she just gave me like keys to the kingdom, like right there. And early on, I learned that I did not have to be diminished by somebody else's thing. And so the next day, when they started joking me and saying I was short, I said, "I am, right?" And then they looked shocked, like, what? That didn't do anything. And then eventually, those same people who used to pick on me started trying to follow me around, trying to figure out why it was that people could F with me and I would still stay myself. So I used all that narrative, all that story, all that expression, and then I channeled it into this song, "Now I'm Gonna Get Angry," where I say, that I'm still the same me. Like, no matter what somebody tried to do, I'm the same me. And each and every one of us has that capacity. It's not a superpower. It's just an isness. It's just a way of being at choice. And too many of us give up that volition and that capacity because we get trained to give it up. As soon as we grow up, we start going to school, they start telling us who we are, who we have to be, and all these other things. And then we get programmed. And then when it comes time for us to actually be ourselves in the world, we don't know how to do it because we're waiting for somebody else to tell us if it's okay for us to be us. Well, I'm not going I have no authority to tell you it's okay to be you, but I can be me in public. And then people can say, "Well, how are you being you?" And I'm gonna say, the same way that you can be you, you know? Take all the experiences you had, be present with the reality of who you are, how you're showing up in the world, and all the energies that come to you, be in gratitude for them, even if they're negative energies, and then use your innate capacity to create to bring something out of it. And I'm hoping that over time, I'll be able to present different ways to instruct or guide people who want to learn how to do that. But we all have those capacities. Later, after I finish publishing this, I will put a link to the song. But the song is just basically like, "Now I'm gonna get angry. Nothing you can do is ever gonna change me. Been here all my life, always being the same me. I see that you're confused. Now we say, let me say it plainly, or whatever. That's how it goes. But that's like the hook. It's like, I've always been me. And then I sing all right. I can rap better. AI can enhance it so it's an enjoyable experience for other people, to combine those talents and to accelerate it. And that is something that's available to all of us. I'm sure there's plenty of folks out here that have so many creative things inside of them. Maybe when they were little kids, they wanted to be a this or that. I wanted to be an artist. That was the first thing I ever wanted to do, is I wanted to be an artist. And my mom said, artists don't make money, boy. And then she tried to steer me in a different direction. But eventually I started to make my way back to it. And I'm sure there's something inside of you that you want to express. And you have this intelligence and you just need an outlet. And I'm trying to share with some of y'all that that can be a way of doing it, because as we keep getting high tech, we need more high touch. We need more human engagement. We need more authentic people. We need more people who are not afraid of being vulnerable and can step into it and turn all of the things that emerge for us, all of our challenges, all of our vulnerabilities, all of our insecurities, to convert that into some kind of recognizable artistic expression that other people can benefit from and learn from and grow through. That's what we all have the capacity to do, but not enough of us are doing it. Too many of us are continuing to like wait for somebody to tell us it's okay for us to be us. Too many of us, and probably not people on Substack, because it tends to be, for as far as I can tell, thinking people who are not afraid of reading or engaging new ideas. But a lot of spaces, folks are not living fully into who we can be. And even when we have these opportunities, because now, like, it used to cost me like $500 to make a song. Now I pay for one subscription. I can make a song. I can make 50 songs a day if I wanted to with this technology and put it out there. I only do it when it feels natural for me to do. And it's so far, it's mostly just been out of emotional spaces that I had to convert to energy. Like when my father figure died, I wrote a song. When I got bothered with mean fake Christians, I wrote a song. When some people called me and my daughter that word, I wrote a song. That's what's kind of emerging from. I'm using it that way. So it's all born out of like deep emotion in real time that I'm able to transmute and convert into something and then distribute to other people to have access to. But there's other ways that these technologies that can be used, that you might have a gift or a talent or something. And we need people like you to do that, because if you don't, more assholes are going to use it to try to figure out how to go revert us back to our basest instincts and to just be evil, you know? And to me, as a caveat, evil to me is the highest form of laziness. I've written about it in the past. Some people don't understand why I would say that, but I would say like this: evil to me is the highest form of laziness, because when people choose to not think, not to expand, and not to grow, and they try to diminish and all this other stuff, things to other people, it's because they don't want to grow. They're too lazy to grow. And so they put all of their energy into maintaining status quo, even though evolution is trying to happen. And those are some evil efforts. And evil doesn't mean bad person to me. It means extremely lazy person. Even if on the surface it looks like they're doing a lot of things, all their energy is used to hold back progress and to degrade people. That's gross. That's evil to me. And it's the extremest form of laziness. But on contrast, these people so easily get many of us to give up our power and our volition. But if we can use these tools to accelerate our expressions, we could actually shift the tides. You know, I personally believe, and that's what I'm trying to do and demonstrate into the things that I create. Anyway, that's a little bit of a lengthy explanation of artificial intelligence. But one of the things I want to share with you right now is actually, if I can pull it up, I want to share a poem that I wrote about artificial intelligence, actually. And I don't use AI to write my stuff because I can write. So I don't need it to do things that I already know how to do. I use it for things that I need enhancement with. So let me see if this thing will pull up. It's tripping. Well, for now, I'm not going to read it. But for those of you who are up here, have you all engaged AI in any kind of way? And if so, have you done it to create anything that you share with other people. And I have no judgment on how you use it. I'm just curious if anybody has it, if anybody wants to put in the chat whether they engaged or not, or if they're scared of it or not, or anything like that. Um, T. Ree, Judy, or other person whose name I can't see. Have you guys engaged AI at all? And if so, how have you? And I'll wait a second to see if anybody is going to put anything in there. And then if not, I'll start running my mouth again for a little bit before I have to get off. So far, it doesn't look like it. Okay. So as if I can't read this poem now, I'll just put it in the notes for this video. But what I want to say to folks, some of the bullet points that I want to leave folks with is as we get high tech, we have to have corresponding high touch per what I learned from John Naisbitt years ago in Megatrends. And I think that is deeply true that our fundamental ways of expressing ourselves are violence and sex. And sex is our expression of yes, violence is our expression of no. And then darkness and shameful things occur when we blend those together. The next tier of expression is language, and language is symbolism, and it's used to convey messaging. It wasn't always used to convey truth, and it always will fall short of the truth. I should tell you that words will always fall short of the truth because they were never designed to contain truth, but maybe to point to it. They can point to it, but they use. I wrote a poem about this one time where I said that words are lies used to point you to truth. Words always fall short. There's no universality to how people use words. Therefore, it can't articulate universal truth. And if you've read some of my posts on the war of the words, you also know that that because words can be used in so many different ways and be manipulated in so many ways. And because sometimes words like the English language, for example, was used to colonize a lot of people. And so the language of the colonizer can never articulate the liberation of the colonized. And so even though I'm using English right now, it is not designed for me to use to articulate my liberation. And so I have to have other ways of expanding myself beyond the limits of those words. And that's where art comes in, where art is able to turn chaos into culture. People can use poetry and songs and create new words and all sorts of things. These are the ways that we get around some of the limitations that are imposed upon us by some of these broken systems that were designed to keep us from us. So that is another touch point that I want to convey. And I want to also convey that as you are able to tap into your awareness, tap into your consciousness, tap into the deeper expressions of your emotions and the encounters you have with other people, all of that expands your energy. And you, if you are a choice, can take whatever energy comes to you, even if somebody's a jerk to you, or a-hole to you, like the people that called me and my daughter niggers and thought they were going to hurt our feelings. I was able to create something out of it and create art out of it because I knew how to go from rage to responsibility with the energy that was given to me by these assholes. So I'll say, thank you, asshole. And then I can turn it into something else. And all of us can do that. And the more that we start to realize that we have that capacity, then whenever we see something that like makes us pissed or whatever it makes us feel, we can also be in gratitude for that. If we use these capacities to be able to convert these energies, we can be like, wow, this person gave me their energy for no reason. All right, awesome. I'm going to convert it. That's a superpower that you all have access to. And to the degree that I can, I'm going to try to share with people how to do it. They don't have to do it. You don't have to do it, but you can. And I want to share that with folks if I can. Last thing, I'm going to try one more time to pull up this poem. And then if I can't, I'll let y'all go. If I can, then you will hear this poem if the internet on my old phone wants to cooperate, where it seems like it doesn't. So I guess from there, I just want to thank the folks who came on live and all the folks who hear this later. I also want to invite you, if you haven't already, to subscribe and to share and to help expand these conversations, because I can tell you, I know what I'm bringing to every moment and every space I'm in. I'm bringing everything I have been, everything that I hope to be, and everything that I can be. All those things I'm bringing to every moment that I'm in, inviting other people to do the same thing. And so if you get value out of it, share just because. And then also, if there are things that you want me to write about, or classes you want me to create, or anything like that, or podcast episodes, I'm doing my best to just kind of give whatever energy has been given to me and to distribute it out into the world in a way that expands people or invites people in expansion as much as possible, because everything in this world is designed to give and receive in perpetuity. We're not designed to hold ourselves back. We're not designed, if you believe in design, to limit ourselves. It's just not natural. Everything else in nature fully expresses itself. A tree isn't a part of a tree. It's a tree in its fullness. A bird's a bird in its fullness. Everything lives in its fullness, except for humans, who often diminish our capacities because of bullies and weak people who cannot stand in the marketplace of ideas and allow things to flourish. They have to suppress, but that's only because they're weak. And so, knowing that, if we give into it, then why? There's no reason. It's not like, if you think it's gonna save your life, I got some news for you. All of us are gonna die. So you might as well get the most out of your experience while you're here. That's the invitation that I kind of bring to folks. And I appreciate you. And I thank you for being on here. And like I said, share, subscribe, and I guess I'll put that poem in the bottom of the notes, because it seems that it does not want to pull up for some reason. All right. Thanks. Appreciate you.